I'd like to thank the Finnegans for their testimony this morning on behalf of the appeal. Jim, there was one thing you said I noted that you said that the Newman Center, even when the homily was good, sometimes the students didn't have the resources to really contribute. So I didn't miss the implication there that the quality of the homily has an implication for the quality and quantity of the collection. So I'm feeling a little bit of pressure. So here goes. So Jesus led Peter, James, and John up a high mountain, and he was transfigured before them. Transfigured. The Transfiguration. That really is not a common word, is it? I'd say unless you belong to a parish by that name, as was the parish where I served as deacon for the first 8 years of my diaconate, or unless you're reading a Harry Potter book, you might never read or hear or ever say it. Often when I told people that the name of the parish I served at was Transfiguration, when they would ask me again, what was that? What was it called? I'd repeat it, and then they'd go, oh, okay. It's a common term for us as parishioners there at that parish, or even as Catholics, as we know this account of the Transfiguration that we just heard. But for most people, it's a very obscure word. And it caused me to actually look it up in the dictionary years ago when I kept having that experience of people not knowing what is that word, what are you saying, to see what, in the secular sense, does transfiguration mean. And the dictionary gave two definitions. One is maybe what we more typically think of, and it said transfigure is to change the outward appearance of, or to transform. As the gospel accounts say, Jesus' face and his clothes shone brightly. They were changed. The second definition, especially in a secular dictionary, really surprised me, but is very fitting for the Transfiguration itself. Second definition was to exalt or to glorify. The physical Transfiguration showed Christ in his glorified state, and the voice of God the Father glorified him in declaring him the Son of God and giving him the authority to be listened to. So that definition helps us understand, why did this event even happen? So you think about it, unlike Christ's baptism, where the voice of God declared God's favor for Jesus for all to hear, the many people that were coming to the baptism of John, the Transfiguration was not really a very public event. Only 3 apostles were there. And afterward, Jesus forbade them to tell others about it until after he had risen. So this was clearly not intended to broadcast the glory of Christ. This was a more personal message. But what was that message? Who was it for, and what does it mean for us? The physical change of the Transfiguration was a glimpse for Jesus and for those apostles of what was to come, and what our ultimate state and reward will be: a changed, glorified, perfected body. A cause for hope and joy and encouragement, a goal worth pursuing, worth suffering for. Combined with the voice of God commanding us to listen to Jesus, the Transfiguration gives authority to Jesus and strengthens him and his apostles for his work to come. Why is this needed? Well, Jesus, as the account says, is conversing with Elijah and Moses. In Luke's account that we did not hear this morning, Luke tells us that they're conversing about his coming passion and death. In the face of such terrible knowledge of what is to come, the Transfiguration gives hope to Jesus and the apostles. This is like a private pregame pep talk in the locker room from the coach before the big game with a tough opponent, transforming the players' self-image to help them know they can win and become champions, though the game will be hard. Putting the coach's faith in his captain, giving him the authority to lead the team. The message of the Transfiguration is that there is glory through suffering, test, and trial. Jesus' transfiguration prefigures his resurrection and our resurrection, but not before suffering and death. Our reading from Genesis that Maddie proclaimed so beautifully helps to drive this point home. Consider Abraham's test of obedience to sacrifice his only son, a son who came to him very late in life, who God had promised to make Abraham a great nation through. Think of the stress Isaac and Abraham must have been under, the worry, the sadness. I mean, poor Isaac. Dad, we've got the fire going, and I've carried all this wood up here for the sacrifice, but where's the lamb? And why are you looking at me like that? And Abraham binding his own son to the wood, ready to sacrifice him. How terrible he must have felt. But through this test of obedience, Abraham is transfigured into the patriarch of the entire Judeo-Christian people and tradition. How perfectly Abraham and Isaac represent God the Father and God the Son. Jesus, the only Son, carries the wood of the cross up the mountain and becomes the true sacrificial lamb, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. This is the pattern of our lives. As Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac, as Elijah and Moses told Jesus of his coming passion and death, we are told things at times like, I'm sorry, but you have cancer, or you have MS, or you have COVID, or I'm sorry, you don't have a job here anymore, or I'm sorry, I don't want to date you or be married to you anymore. Or, I'm sorry, but your loved one has died. But the promise of the Transfiguration is that if we persevere, if we trust, if we hold out, God will overcome all for us. If not in this life, then in the next. There is good news and bad news. The good news is we will be transfigured, changed, glorified. The bad news is not without testing and pain. But the best news is the pain and testing is temporary. The glory is eternal. As this is the pattern of our life, this is the pattern of Lent. This is why we do Lent. The difficulty of persevering in prayer, of fasting and abstaining from pleasures, of almsgiving to the needy instead of keeping our money to ourselves. But in the end, after it all, there is Easter. There is resurrection. There is glory. There is transfiguration.